Hey guys, and welcome back to Mad About Skin. In today's video, I'm going to be talking you through a question which you guys have been asking in droves over the past couple of days. And that is, as consumers, can we trust Korean sunscreens? Obviously, this has come about as a result of the Purito sunscreen scandal, which broke a couple of days ago. I'm not going to cover that in this video because I've already done it on another video, which I will link up there. So check that out if you want to know the background. But the fact that that specific sunscreen, which we knew and loved, so many of us loved that product, was advertised as an SPF 50, but in independent testing, it came out as an SPF 19. That left us shook, and we started to reevaluate our thoughts on Korean skincare in general. Loads of people have reached out and said, actually, their faith in the Korean sunscreen market has been shook, and so I'm going to talk through my thoughts and feelings on it and how I'm going to approach it in my own skincare routine going forward. Before we get into it, do just want to point out that this test was done on Purito, one specific sunscreen from Purito. That brand has actually withdrawn all their sunscreens from the market, and there is no scientific proof out there that the other Korean sunscreens that we know and love are failing to deliver the SPF value which they claim and advertise as being able to. So it is worth calling that out, though I do appreciate people's thoughts and feelings on why it has shaken their confidence in the industry as a whole. It's also worth pointing out that there is a huge difference between Korean sunscreens, which we're talking about in this video, and Japanese sunscreens. I know everyone knows, Korea and Japan are two different countries, but I think when it comes to sunscreen and beauty products, we often just talk about Asian skincare, Asian beauty, and that actually can lump these two together. Japan has a totally different testing and evaluation regime for their sunscreens than Korea does. So whilst we might have issues and faults with the Korean system, the Japanese one is totally separate to that. And actually, I will be sharing in a video in the coming weeks my favorite Japanese tried, tested and independently verified Japanese sunscreens. So don't fear, they are two totally different testing regimes, and I thought it was worth calling that out today. So let's get into it. Thoughts on Korean sunscreen? Well, Korean sunscreen hit the Western market around 2 years ago, and we fell hard. Honestly, I was like the biggest fan going. Anyone who's ever been chased around the beach by their mother spraying that old style sunscreen, it was gloopy, it was thick, it went on as a white cast, it never sunk in, it left you feeling greasy, and the sand would stick to it like that the second you touched it. It was a real unpleasant product to have to use on the body, let alone thought of having to put it on your face. And so when we tried our first Korean sunscreens, which were lightweight, there was no ashiness, there was no white cast, it sunk in. You could choose between a matte or a dewy formulation based on your own skin type. We were like, it's like a revelation, and people flocked to them in droves. As a result, I think it has some real positive impacts because people that were previously avoiding sunscreen because they were so horrible to use started using it in their daily routine, and that has to be a huge tick in the box and bonus for Korean sunscreens and something they've really been able to bring to the market. So let me share my thoughts and feelings on how I'm going to approach them going forward. Well, for the meantime, I put a pause on the Korean sunscreens in my routine. I'm going to continue to use the products that I have used them up. I hate waste. I just think it's really wasteful. And also, if you take the Purito as an example, whilst it wasn't delivering an SPF 50 plus as advertised, which is totally wrong, and businesses and products have to live up to the claims that they make, it was still delivering an SPF of 19. So a lot of people have contacted me worried that their past use of this product could impact their skin. It's still providing a level of sun protection way in excess of what your body naturally produces, and an SPF of 19 is still a significant level of protection. It's fine for me here in the UK in winter where it's dark, the days are short, it's a bit dreary out there, a lot of cloud cover. That's absolutely fine for the level of protection I need in that environment. So I'm going to use up the bottles I have, but then I'm going to switch away from Korean sunscreen. I'm just going to talk you through why I've made that decision. First of all, this lab which produced the Purito formulation and provided the testing which Purito then used to justify its SPF 50 produces some of the other favourite holy grail Korean sunscreens on the market. I'm talking about the Klairs Watery UV Essence, the Keep Cool Bamboo Essence. These are huge selling, firm favourite products, and since they haven't been tested and proven to be substandard in terms of the protection they offer, but they're produced in that same lab. And so for me, I want to make sure, after we've done a little bit more investigation and Purito have conducted whatever internal investigations they want to do, I want to work out whether this is a one-off issue with the Purito product, there might have been an error in the testing which led to the claim not being delivered, or whether it's a systemic issue with that lab as a whole. And until we know that, I don't feel comfortable using products from that lab, which covers a whole range of the Korean sunscreen products. I've also had my faith in the Korean Federal Drug Administration shaken. This is the agency which is supposed to be protecting us as the consumers and making sure that the claims which skincare companies put on their bottles are justified and backed up. They reviewed the testing which came out of the Purito lab, and they were then able to justify that SPF 50 plus that Purito stamped on their bottle. Had that agency have said no, then Purito wouldn't have been able to market it the way it did. Now, obviously, they might have been looking at the same false data that Purito were. Who knows until more investigation's done. But just as an agency, we rely on them to really defend us as the consumer, and my faith in that has been shaken. And with that comes a faith in the whole Korean sunscreen industry, which is regulated by that same agency. If you look to something like the Australian standards, so the agencies over in Australia have the strictest and most stringent regulations when it comes to sunscreens. We shouldn't be surprised, you know, Australia has some of the harshest rays out there, and so their agencies apply the harshest standards. They do a lot of independent testing themselves. They demand an awful lot more in terms of testing data from their companies. As a result of that, quite a few companies have said, not worth the hassle, we don't want to sell into Australia. That is the company's loss, not Australia's, because they're getting the best quality and highest level of guaranteed protection in their products which are marketed. In Australia and under the Australian system, they don't actually recognise a lot of the filters used in Korean sunscreens. Now, these aren't Korean filters. Some people always call them Korean filters. They're not. They're using a whole range of products, but they're the ones that are primarily used by Korean skincare and sunscreen companies. They're not recognised in Australia because they don't believe that the data is there to significantly back it up, and they're doing some more research in that. This research takes years. It doesn't mean that these products are defective in any way. It just means they don't have the same level of proven effectiveness as what some of the more established filters do. Again, for that reason, I think I want to be feeding off of the Australian example, where I know they are applying the strictest regulations and rules possible to protect their consumers. And so I'm looking to those as an example of some agencies which I do think we can trust and place our trust in, and leading by example. Finally, and I guess this kind of links to the previous point I made, because a lot of the Korean sunscreens use newer filters and newer technologies which are much more pleasant to use on the skin and come with them all those benefits that I outlined earlier for why we all flocked to them as products and absolutely fell hard for them. Because a lot of this technology to the West is relatively new, it hasn't got the same amount of robust third-party independent testing as what some of the more established brands do. You'll see a lot of consumer protection organisations, both here in the UK, in Australia, New Zealand, over in the States. They conduct their own testing to independently verify some of the claims on these products. Because Korean sunscreens are newer to the Western market, a lot of them haven't been put through their paces by those third parties. That does not mean that they're substandard in any way. It doesn't mean that we can't believe them. It just means it hasn't got that independent seal of approval and tick on the box, which is what, because my faith has been shaken by this episode, I am starting to look for in my sunscreens. I think sunscreen, just as a general point, is the most important step in your skincare routine, and it's the one where we really have to have faith and confidence in the products that we're using. I'm not abandoning Korean sunscreens forever. I just want to see a little bit more testing done into their effectiveness before I then reincorporate them into my skincare routine. I think over the past, couple of years, we've really prioritized the aesthetic appearance and feel of a product over the testing, the data, and the accuracy of the product. I think maybe on reflection that was a little bit of a mistake, and so I'm looking to some sunscreens, which I did a whole video on the ones I trust, which I'll leave a link to there, all independently tested and verified, so check that out if you haven't already. What I'm now looking for in my sunscreens is accepting, a bit of ashiness, a bit of a white cast, maybe a slightly more greasy finish than the matte that I really like is preferable to not knowing what actual strength and protection you're using. I have to have full faith in the product I'm using, which is why I've turned to the ones I mentioned in that video over my hardcore holy grail Korean sunscreen favourites. Like I say, I'm going to be using up those products because I don't like to see waste, but then I'm going to transition into some of the more established brands, which I just have faith in and have that independent third-party testing to back them up. I would love to know your thoughts on Korean sunscreen going forward, because I know so many of the people that follow this channel absolutely love it and go hardcore for Korean sunscreens. Leave me a comment below what your thoughts are. This video is designed as a bit of a guide to give you a bit of a background and a bit of some information to make your own purchasing decisions. I'm in no way saying all Korean sunscreens are bad and should be dropped from your skincare routine. Quite the opposite. I just think you need to choose products which you have confidence and faith in that are going to give you the right protection for your skin's needs. So hopefully you found this useful, and I'd love for you to sound off in the comments and let me know your thoughts. Wherever you are in the world, guys, stay safe, stay well, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Bye.